All right, we got it. Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here today. As I said earlier, before we started the call, this is going to be a very rich and detailed conversation with all of you. And I'm really excited to see what you have to contribute towards the idea of women and leadership and the opportunities, especially the global opportunities that are available for women to really rise up and shine and bring their enormous talents to the world as a whole. So we're going to start with 45 seconds. Each one of you can give us a little brief overview of who you are. And I start with Dr. Joelle Martin.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you. My name is Joelle Martin, authentically. And I am a 30+ year specialist in diversity, equity, and inclusion, transformational leadership, and a previous owner of a full service advertising agency. So working with my clients is a tremendous opportunity to intersect all of those. I'm looking at the watch. If you could just let me know when my 45 minutes has gone up, but I will end with this. I am delighted to talk about women and leadership and rising up, because I tell you, that's pretty much the story of my life, going from one career to the other, to now being a global transformational leadership developer.
Superb. Thank you so much. Donaji.
Can't hear you.
Yes, sorry. My name is Donaji Montes. I am the CEO of Intechnational and a co-founder of HackerStrike. Intechnational is a consulting and coaching firm to help technology-based companies to do international business. We are focused on the US. And also we have inner transformational workshops that helps the business owners to transform and break some paradigms. With HackerStrike, I'm a co-founder, and that's a cybersecurity company that helps businesses to protect them against ransomware. That's it with my time. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Hi, I'm David Saltzman. I'm a partner in the corporate department of Squire, Patton, Boggs. I'm honored to be here. Squire, Patton, Boggs is a global law firm with 45 offices in 20 different countries. At least I think that's the current stats. It changes a lot, so sometimes it gets hard to keep track of. And as a corporate partner, I work with people of all genders and all cultures, and it keeps things interesting. So in a nutshell, that's me. Squire, Patton, Boggs, global law firm, one-stop shop for all your business needs.
Excellent. Alina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alina Toderascu. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the VP of Marketing for CYPHER Learning, which is a leading provider of learning platforms for organizations around the world. So my main responsibility is defining the global strategy for all of our free brands, and then finding ways to regionalize everything that we do, because we have locations all around the world, and leading the marketing team towards success.
Beautiful. Carolina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Miranda. I am the founder and CEO of Cultivating Capital. It's a certified B Corp since 2012, and we help companies to certify and recertify as B Corps. If you're not yet familiar with B Corps, it's basically a global movement to help companies to use business as a force for good. And so we work towards an economy that is going to be equitable, inclusive, and regenerative. And happy to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you. So for those listening to the call today, we have some questions for the panelists. I'm going to throw out the question, and one of the panelists can pick up the baton and we'll start the conversation. Eventually, everyone will have an opportunity to weigh in. So the first question I have for you are, what are some of the real barriers that you have faced and or other women still face in the workplace today? So we're talking about real barriers that you or other women still face in the workplace today.
I can jump in with that one. Speaking as a business owner, one of the biggest challenges for women is actually being able to finance their ventures and being able to access capital. Most of the investment dollars that go to startups are going to companies that are, not run by women. So I think only 2% of, the venture funds go to women-owned businesses. Even less than that goes to, businesses that are founded by women of color. And so, I run a small business. I work primarily with other women business owners, also small businesses. And definitely being able to access capital is an ongoing challenge. So most women are bootstrapping their own ventures, and that sets up some limitations. That also plays out on the back end, in the number of women-owned businesses that can actually reach $1 million in revenue. The percentages that I've heard recently, and don't quote me on this, but they might not be that far off the mark, is that only like 2% of women-owned businesses reach $1 million in revenue, and only like 10% actually pass 6 figures. So it's really a small percentage of women-owned businesses that are able to grow and scale and provide the the income necessary for women to sustain themselves and their families.
And I think this is a really important issue today, especially when there's so many women starting up a new company and looking towards growth. Someone else like to weigh in on this question?
I'll go ahead and chime in. So kind of being more on the technology side of things, especially, when I deal with trade on like the raw material side, if you're dealing with different cultures, some cultures handle, women interactions. If you're, if it's going to be someone from like India or China, to be honest with you, you have to understand how the culture works, because sometimes they hold women at different values than they do with men. So how they negotiate contracts, even having a meeting with a woman sometimes is a little bit different. So that tends to be an obstacle. For technology, a lot of women find it a bit intimidating, just to kind of like get into the industry. And because of the lack of support, and flexibility at home, it makes it really hard for a woman to feel comfortable and to learn all these things and stay flexible, really widening that gender gap. So I know it was like a brief kind of answer, but, kind of want to touch base on both sides. But yeah, that's definitely kind of what I've experienced, as a woman in these industries. So. Thank you.
Joelle, as a woman of color, what have you seen as the real barriers that have faced women in the workplace?
Not unlike other places, but there are stereotypes, there are biases that exist for women of color. I know in my path, I've been fortunate to have a few mentors who have been white men, allies. So David, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say on that. The other thing that I'm finding more recently is that we as women in business, Black women, any woman of color, we are forming our own circles. We form circles to support each other in being successful. And I think that's very, very important. There used to be a fallacy about crabs in the barrel. I don't find that. I think in our businesses, we look to collaborate. We look to be great at what we do. There's a lot of affinity group action that's happening. And has it been easy? No. But is it impossible? No, it isn't. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. And I think those are the barriers that many of us are realizing. We need the collaboration with other women, and that becomes a very serious issue. The more that we get involved in our businesses, we need that support. And like you, I'm looking forward to hearing what David has to say. So,
can I offer one other thought?
Yeah.
As a DE&I specialist of 30 plus years, I find it challenging that so many newcomers are coming into that field and saying, I'm it. Not meaning me, Joelle, it, but I am the expert on DE&I. And I find that very challenging because they haven't been on the journey.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, the wisdom that one gathers as we, you know, age, you know, whatever our experiences are, that I think is a big piece of that as well. You know, sometimes when you're young, you have a lot of idealism and think you know it all. So wait until you find out otherwise, which tends to be the case. Donaji, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, adding to what Valerie mentioned is that in male-dominated industries, it's even more fun for women, to say it in a light and positive way. For example, in the technology industry or technology that is for factories, there are some people, like decision makers, that only want to deal with men. That's it. They don't want to see a woman. And if they are faced with a man and a woman, they will only look at the men. And that will be the case in a meeting room. That will be the case on a video call. That will be the case on a phone call. So I have the experience of one of my clients that had that. And basically she incorporated a partner, a male partner, just to help her on those cases, because she noticed, she was aware of what was going on. It was not her technology, it was not her company. It was the bias and the perception of the other people that are used to deal with men. So she incorporated a partner that has equity on her company. And now whenever she faces that, it's like, please, could you help me with this? And suddenly everything just started to flow again. And it's very sad to mention this, but it's something that is really happening. So that's one
so
thing.
the question I would have for you, do you think that's more prevalent in a culture like Mexico than or do you think that's everywhere?
I will love to say that it's only in Mexico, but I will be lying.
Okay.
Do you know if the company that you were talking about has an office of DEI in it? Or is this a company, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, or is this one where the people pretty much have to make the changes themselves on an individual basis?
You're talking about the client or the decision maker?
At the client, where you noted the woman who said that she was having some difficulties. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of the things that I was thinking, that obviously these things take change, unfortunately, generations to change, unfortunately, much longer than they should. But there are a number of ways that we can help. And one I was thinking was, if a company has an office of DEI, then they can help make institutional changes and push things along. Squire, Patton, Boggs has had an office of DEI for a number of years, and it has shown in the awards that we have won. International Firm of the Year, Women in Business Law Awards, named among best law firms for women by Working Mother, recognized by Euromoney's Women in Business Law Awards for gender diversity, women in law, work-life balance, best place to work for LGBTQ equality, top 100 firm for minority attorneys, and a bunch of others that I won't bore you with. But the point is that it's not individuals on our own that are taking up the mantle that realize we need to be better as a society or as a company, but rather institutionally, there is an office with people designated to stay on top of these issues, with resources to work with communications and help further this along. So the description that you just gave is thankfully something I have not encountered at Squire, Patton, Boggs. Now, admittedly, I'm a man, so things may happen that I have not seen, but you know, I find it very striking that one of the very first deals that I worked on when joining Squire 20 years ago or so as a junior attorney, I was asked to help out in the Cleveland office with a project. The lead partner was a woman. The second in command, if you will, was a woman. And the lead specialist for this complicated matter was a woman. So it was very striking to me. And it was actually pretty cool to see that, you know, I was the low person on the totem pole, if you will, with the 3 women above me running the show who could do what they did just as well as any man. Yeah. So,
and I think
David, were those people, or I'm sorry, when you were saying that, those top level women execs, were they in the US or where were they located?
This was in the US.
Yeah.
This part was in the US.
Yeah, to piggyback off Donaji, right? I don't want to butcher your name, Donaji. I was actually in contact with a China supplier, and I had spoken to a colleague of mine, and they had said to find a male to go ahead and negotiate contracts for me, because as a female, they probably wouldn't speak with me. So I actually myself had that experience where I was putting up different job descriptions on Upwork super last minute to try to find a male to go ahead and negotiate contracts and who had this expertise and whatnot. So yes, in the US, thankfully women have a lot of, I guess, more equality rights. That's the beauty of, being an American here in the land of opportunity. But unfortunately, when it comes to different cultures, they, operate very much differently, which is, global trade. It's about, trying to understand different cultures and work within those means. So, would love to work with, more women in different cultures, but unfortunately, we're jabbing with it. So let's see what we can do.
Well, that's the piece that we're clearly addressing here and want to change. Alina, what is your experience? Because, clearly you have another side of it, and it may be the same, because again, this is a global issue. There's no question about it, that women need to be recognized more fully for their contributions and given the opportunities to rise. And David, I'll just shoot back to you for a second to say, I am absolutely impressed by the level of culture that you are working in, because I've done some cultural work, and I like to say most companies are dysfunctional because they haven't done the groundwork to cover those issues adequately. And it's imbued in their whole cultural experience. And of course, it's not just a global thing, but in each one of you, you're going to be having that experience. So I'll jump back to you, Alina, for a second. I'd like to hear from you.
I do have to agree with Donaji and Valerie that it's very dependent on the region and the local culture. So luckily I work for an American company, and our CEO is a supporter of female leaders. We have a lot of female leaders within our company, but another perspective is that sometimes you have to interact with some cultures, like for example, the Middle East, when for a woman, it's complicated to interact with male decision makers, because male decision makers in those countries have a hard time interacting with women because they're not supposed to, basically. So that's a whole different problem that you have to take into account. Other than that, I do also have to agree that when it comes to decision makers, and especially at the C-level suite, there is this stereotype that men are the most capable in some way to make the business decisions, usually. So it has happened. I have seen in the past, for example, women being bypassed by a male that was at the same level at her in the company, the same job title, but decision makers going to the male for the final decision instead of the woman.
So let me jump to the next question I have here, which is, I want to hear from each one of our panelists on what we can do to overcome these barriers. And I know many of you on the panel are already doing so. So I would love to hear, because I think this is helpful to those who might be listening to this afterwards, to help them understand some of the ideas and strategies that they can think of when they're moving. So I'm going to come back to Joelle again and ask you for some input on that one.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm involved with my clients is having them see both the benefits of having women involved in rising up in their companies, because there are some financial reasons. Some really great work has been done identifying the degree to which equity in women is paying off for their organizations, both on boards and as leaders and in the workforce. So that's one thing. That is the old phrase, it's because it's the right thing to do for your business, but I say it's also the right thing to do for example, getting brand creativity and other things, But in any event, there's a very solid business case for it. What we've been doing also is having what we call listen, talk, and learn groups, so that people can get together and bust loose those stereotypes, because part of the problem of a stereotype is they put everybody under that one umbrella. You know, a stereotype essentially saying that all women are fill in the blank. And they make their decisions based on that, not realizing they may be missing out on a really great deal. They may be missing out on creating a tight workforce. So what I do is I do a lot of the transformational communication work to coach people on how to be, because the people that I get to work with are those that say, I want to be better, I want to make a change, I want my workforce to be positive. So that's my niche, and I get to serve up to them my 20 plus or so years to help them or to support them and doing the right thing for business and the right thing for their people.
Yeah, that's great. Carolina, I would like to hear from you, because as you said, there's a lack of funding for women. There is very few women-funded VC companies around at this point, although it is on the rise. I know a couple myself, but there is an issue there. So what would you say to overcome some of those barriers that you address when people are working towards getting financing for their companies?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first thing is we need to be aware of the issues and the problems. And going back to the previous question, I think that we were focusing on some of the cultural challenges, but I would caution us to not pay attention to the very real dynamics that are occurring here within the US, because by almost any metric, women are still lagging behind where men are. If you look at equal pay, if you look at number of women CEOs running Fortune 500 companies, look at number of women on boards, even though there is ample evidence that demonstrates that it's actually beneficial for a company. And I'm sure Dr. Martin has a lot more data about that than I have. Look at, women in leadership in Congress. Look at, women on the Supreme Court. We're not even at, halfway women representation on the Supreme Court. So, yes, there are going to be some cultural issues that we're going to encounter, which is inevitable any time that we are dealing with other cultures. But we need to also recognize that there still exist here in the year 2022 some very real challenges for women. And as far as what we can do about them, I think that we need to look at, yes, who is providing the financing, where is that financing going? But then you also have to look at what additional support is needed to help some women-owned businesses to be able to land larger contracts, to have the mentoring in place that they need to identify what they need to do to run a business. A lot of women don't necessarily have that. And so lacking that mentorship, they're trying to figure things out on their own. And that is always going to, to hold you back. So I think that these are some very specific things that, that we can all do.
Terrific. David, I want to jump up to you for a second, because one of the questions I had for today is, how can men play, in mitigating the stereotyping of women and becoming better allies? Because if what we're hearing here is that, yes, companies do, and there's many statistics out there, companies that are run by women are actually doing better than the companies run by men at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And that there are indeed some phenomenal women leaders out there. But again, I think the issue of allyship becomes a really important piece if we are to change the stereotyping and the gender biases that are going on. So I'd love to hear from you, your ideas, which would be, how do we overcome these obstacles?
Well, I think the starting point is, as Carolina mentioned, awareness. That's got to be the starting point from everything, so that you realize what your limitations are, what's going on, what's not going on, and hopefully have an idea of what to change. Then, of course, there is the mentoring, as Dr. Martin mentioned first and Carolina mentioned again, which, frankly, in my opinion, is treat the genders equally, just as I would mentor a male. mentor a female in the same way. If I am revising a document that a female junior associate put together, meet with her afterwards and explain, here are why I made these revisions. This is why it works in this case. In a different context, we'd want to do a little differently like this. And basically help educate the same as we would a man, if you will. We should have an open door policy so that they can come speak to us anytime, again, man or woman, and be a confidant. Let them know at any time of day, night, weekend, if you need to talk, here's my phone number. Don't hesitate to call. And again, I say that to everyone. I think it is important to establish trust, because if the person that we are reaching out to doesn't trust us, if we're not clearly being sincere, then we're not going to achieve what I was going to say want to achieve, but I'll actually change that to what we need to achieve, which is the equality. As you mentioned, there are studies that show that some women-owned or women-run companies work better than male-owned companies. I've read that female politicians are often more effective than male politicians. The reason being in this article was that male politicians want to be politicians, whereas the women become politicians because they want to change things or make things happen. You know.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether one believes that or not, it shows that there are different attitudes, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah. So you bring up something important. Both you and Carolina mentioned the idea of mentoring. And we know that there's a difference between mentoring and sponsoring. So in terms of allyship, how do you bring in more sponsorship of women? Because it's not enough just to educate them in whatever it is that needs to be educated on. It's more about, how can I be your champion? And I think that's really what I'm trying to address here with allyship, is how can you be a champion for women in your life?
Well, some of that has to happen behind the scenes too, I think. And to continue my comments before, I was thinking that part of all of this includes praising women just as much as men in front of others for the good work they do, depending on what they do, because there may be certain things that are sensitive, again, regardless of whether male or female, that really should be addressed behind the scenes, you know, not criticizing someone in front of other people, whether it's on behalf of someone else or even of that person. But behind the scenes, that also means talking to someone and saying, hey, you know, this person would actually, I think, be perfect for this job or this project. And you might not have given that person some thought, but here's why I think this person deserves some consideration.
So let me ask Donaji, have you ever been sponsored in your career?
I've been sponsored. I was doing a review of the bosses I had, and it was 5 women and 6 men when I was an employee. And I was like, that's very interesting. And I think I need to thank a lot of men who really believe in me, and they gave me great opportunities, like going to an international position, and then from Arizona moved to Silicon Valley, and all the opportunities that I was granted. They were huge opportunities, and basically I've been mentored by, I will say, mostly men that take me under their wing. And they don't see, as David was mentioning, I don't think they see me as a woman. They just see me as a professional that is performing how they want to get the job done. So, and I think that relates a little bit with my childhood and how I was raised. I was never told you cannot do this because that's woman, or that's for girls and that's for boys. And I remember I liked dresses, but I liked to play very hard. So if that was not a good combination, then pants were better for me. So, and I think mentoring is very, very important, and both ways. One is seeking for a good mentor that will push you and that will lead you and will guide you to places you haven't been. And also to share the experience you have gotten and all the strength you have gained over the years through all those mentors that help you with different generations. And I had the opportunity to do a class in my university, a 1-week class, and I put together a class for encouraging women to put a technology business, to start their own technology business. And I was shocked because half of my class were men. And I was like, I put on the diploma, woman dare to be a business owner in tech, and men show up. And I was just blown away and thinking, if we had a particular targeted program for men, did 50% of women will show up? I don't think so. So in my head, there's something also we need to change as women. It's not everything about men or the others that are doing. It's also we need to change a lot of our mindset to dare to get to the places we want and to dare to be part of the change we really want. So yeah, mentorship is very important. And I think it's both ways, like seeking and giving, because when you do either or, you learn a lot.
So you bring up a really important piece here. It's, you know, it's not just about, you know, the us and them conversation. It's not about the men versus the women. And a lot of it is, you know, in my opinion too, is on the women's shoulders in terms of what are they willing to do to show up and be more authentic, and how can they, you know, take control of their own lives and not expect that other people are going to meet them where they think they should be met, other people being the men in their business lives or whatever. But I think this is a really important piece that, and I see Joelle nodding her head there. So I'm going to jump back to you for a second, Joelle, because I'd love to get your input on that.
All right. I totally agree. Part of my own personal breakthrough was between the time when I grew up in an all-Black community, and then I took a training course, and I discovered that there was a world out here that was not in my community, you know? So I was listening to everyone and thinking, is there a point at which women must take this huge risk, go out on the skinny branches and say, here I stand, I can do no other? Because that's how it was for me. You know, I got it. That's how transformational training globally happened. You know, went back to school. And I was also wondering, because Donna, say your name, please.
Donaji, you can call me Donna, it's okay.
No, I want to say it right, please.
Donaji.
Donaji, thank you so much. Donaji was talking, I'm wondering how many women are first or second generation entrepreneurs? And when I was growing up, there was no one in my family that was entrepreneurial. They were all educators, you know, and not with a lot of money either. So I think that's part of the mindset thing. If we can get more women through the mindset of, yes, you belong in technology, you have gifts to give in technology, I think we could do such good. And I'm amazed at what you were saying, that 50% of the people in your course were men. At some point offline, I'd like to learn more about that. All right, Jacqueline, have I answered your question?
Oh, yeah, that was a great answer, and it's absolutely in line with my feeling. I think that more women need to take responsibility for saying, you know, this is who I am, this is what I do, and you need to accept it. And that is a mind shift. It's a mind shift that a lot of women have not reached yet. And I think that's where we, as strong women on this call today, and David, our strong man over here, we need to be able to bring this message, which is what we're doing today. And I think this is really a critical part of how do we help women, as I said at the beginning, rise up. That's a big piece for this. So I love where this conversation has gone. Alina, do you have anything you want to add to this segment of the conversation?
So I can just speak only from my experience working within a company, but I do agree that it's also our responsibility as women to take responsibility for our actions, meaning the landscape is not going to change that much within the next 2 or 5 years. And my tip is to start developing a thick skin, because these situations are going to appear and appear over and over again. How you manage them, that's what's gonna make the difference. As a woman, your responsibility is to perform your job the best way possible, and speaking up when you need to speak up, because that's also, I've seen this happen in my team with some of the ladies that I have, that when they have confrontations with certain male members, they kind of get demotivated. They're gonna go hide in a corner and they don't want to continue anymore. And if you keep doing that, you're not gonna advance too much. So you need to understand that, yes, it's gonna happen. It's not your problem, it's their problem. Move on, do your job the best way you can, and speak up when you need to speak up. If you want a seat at a certain table, you have to earn that seat, and try to do the best work that you can.
Yeah, and that speaks to the issue of confidence. And some of you may remember there was a book a few years ago called The Confidence Code, and it was written by a BBC reporter and I think a Wall Street journalist. And they had done massive studies on women and what was the thing that was holding them back most of the time, including the writers themselves. And it was confidence. Having the confidence to be able to speak up, having the confidence to take decisions that may not be the right or wrong ones, whatever case may be, and having the confidence to know that what you have to offer is valid. And I think there's an educational element to this as well, that many women need to be educated into it, because to the point, first generation entrepreneurs, as Joelle, you just said, I'm a first generation entrepreneur too. And, Donaji, the same thing. We didn't have any role models. Carolina, the same thing. There were no role models for us to figure it out. So we basically had to go to bat for ourselves and figure it out the hard way for a lot of the time. And, you make lots of mistakes and then you realize that that's not where you wanted to go. So I think, again, education becomes a really important part of this, and giving people the necessary support to build the skills of more confidence in order to get past things like the imposter syndrome, because there's another big one that comes up regularly. Somebody's going to find out I'm faking it. How many of us as successful women have had those moments where you go, yeah, really just waiting to be found out here. I'm not smart as I think I am, which is, again, it's a mindset issue. And that's the transformations that need to take place, frankly. And it's up to us to be the role models for it, because we are role models at this stage of women who are out there doing it. And
Jacqueline,
doing well. Yeah.
You asked earlier about things that men can do to help improve the atmosphere. And I think that's improving that atmosphere where women can feel confident speaking up, or at least coming to a man behind the scenes if it's a man that they would need to go to, is something that can be done. I would also point out that the workplace, at least at law firms, is different than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I'm not just talking about in terms of gender, but when I was going to college, at least, there was a perception that in the legal practice, there would be a senior partner and would take an associate under his or her wing and say, here's how we do things. That doesn't happen. That never happened to me. That did not happen with many men that I know of. So I think there should not be an assumption that men get all the mentoring that they need, because there are a lot of men out there that essentially feel very similar to the way women feel. Now, not in the same as in people don't see me, they don't talk to me because of my gender, but that we have not necessarily been given advancements that a golden boy might otherwise have been given.
So this is an important point, David, because one of the things I've been talking about lately, the last couple of years, is about the need for conversations across the aisles. We need men and women talking to each other about what's going on. There's all these microaggressions and gender biases and all kinds of, stories that we've been raised with and so forth. We have to break that down by having the conversations with each other, not just in our silos, because I think this is really a critical piece at this stage. If we are to improve the odds of more women claiming their space in whatever organizations they're working with, Anybody else got some thoughts on that particular piece? Because I think this is a really critical one. Joelle, you want to take this one?
Well, David, what you're saying, I thought was absolutely brilliant. I just didn't think of it from a man's perspective. Like, you know, when I was growing up, it was very hierarchical. You know, like you follow the leader and so on and so forth. And then that might be why we have 50% men in a training program. They want to find a safe space where they can learn. So this, that was golden for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was clearly a big point right there. Anybody else got thought on this?
Doug, you haven't said anything.
Well, I wanted to. I'm willing to say something for sure, and I'll go back to Donaji's comment about the 50%, and then Dr. Martin, what you just said. I think what happened there probably is related to men. They do stuff because they can get away with it, right? And they have always done it. I've seen studies where men will go after jobs they're not at all qualified for, and women will not go after jobs they're fully qualified for because there's a lack of whatever that is, confidence or whatever. And so what it reminds me of is the learnings that need to happen is that we need to observe not just cross-culturally, but cross-gender about how others behave and adapt into some of those things. Right? The fact that men do that is good and bad, right? And the good part of it, women could tap into and be more aggressive or more assertive or more forthcoming to go after things, I think. So I think there's some opportunities here, going back to your question, Jacqueline, how can we make faster progress? There's training, there's education, there's mentoring, and there's adjustment. There's appreciation that there's a chemistry going on here between people of different cultures and genders and things, and we need to each adapt to the others, and that ecosystem that we creates something better, and hopefully all boats rise and the water rises at the same time.
Well, I think you're right on about all of this, Doug, and I think what's really interesting is, as a one-time global nomad, that's how I used to describe myself, living in different cultures as I've done, and having different points of view and being able to embrace all of that. For the Americans on the call, I have to say Americans for the most part are very provincial, and I find that very difficult to deal with at times. But I think we have a global perspective here in the Global Chamber and in this particular audience that we have right now, which obviously means a much broader perspective than how most people tend to live their lives. Most people live their lives that way. And in the global community, we have to live our lives that way. So I think there's a piece in here too, in terms of our ability to take in the not alternatives, but the broader spectrum of things, and that makes sense to us as global people. And I think that's a big piece right there. Am I making any sense? I hope so. Good. Sometimes I waffle. I have no ideas.
Because Donaji, isn't the lesson from what you saw the lesson that women can be more assertive and go after certain things? I mean, there's a politeness if it says women. I would also think, like, what the heck? Why would a man do that? But men kind of take it, right? Isn't there an opportunity for women to take more?
Yes, I think there is, but we need to own it, and I think personally and as a group, because if we don't believe or we don't trust or we don't want to take the risk, then somebody else will. And as you said, men will take a position if they are just half of the job profile checklist done, and a woman, if it's 70 might hesitate, and because we wanted to get it done and we wanted to have it perfectly. But well, adding to what you said, Doug, I think because of that, it's so important to have diverse teams, because we have seen when technology is made by a specific profile of people, then you get technology that has specific biases. And then if you're not in this zip code, you won't get the funding, or you will have these hacks. And it's because people have just live in a certain way that they just make them think that way. So if you have a diverse team, not only men and women, but a diverse team, as we were talking, multicultural, multi-language, multi-gender, like very open, then you will have a richer conversation and a richer decisions as well. You will have somebody that will be polite and will be great to have as diplomat, and it could be a man or a woman. And you have the risk taker that will say, yes, we can do this, and let's move forward and make it happen. Because I was preparing for the panel, I was also talking that I personally disagree when then you will just give whatever, the grant, the money, or the position just because it's a woman. Like, the reason to get something shouldn't be your gender. And I'm a woman and I want to encourage us, but not because it's like, okay, she's a woman and we need to have the statistics to have a woman in, so she doesn't fulfill, just put it in. It's like, no, you should keep looking or you should do something different, but not because she's a woman and we need to have a woman just to fulfill our stats.
To fill the quota is what you're saying. It's not a quota issue. Yeah. I'm mindful of the time, and I know there might be some questions that are coming up, but one of the last questions I have for the panel is this. I had phrased it this way: what opportunities for women have improved over the last 5 years? I think we've covered that. So let's go forward 5 years and think about what opportunities are there for women over the next 5 years to truly take, I want to use the word, control of their own lives and of the businesses that they choose to be associated with. So thinking forward, some ideas on the future for women.
For me and my path, what this has brought to mind to me is do a high-powered entrepreneurial preparation course for women that are just starting out or midway. You know, they don't need to all go through the challenges that many of us had to go through not knowing. So I'm excited about the possibility of having a transformational program for women who aspire to be entrepreneurs, particularly in the field of technology.
Excellent. I love that idea. Let me ask Carolina, what's your idea for the future?
Well, I look at things from a systemic perspective. And so I think that when we look at this issue, we need to recognize that things are operating at multiple levels. There are things that women can do, and at the same time, women exist within certain systems that are occurring around us. And so if what we want is equity, we need to also accept that the rising tide, to use the metaphor that Doug mentioned, all boats right now are not at the same level, right? And so even if the water goes up, if things remain as they are, some boats are going to be rising more than others are going to be rising. So I think that we need to look at what is it that needs to be changed within the system as well, because at the end of the day, that is what's going to really drive change. And to that point, I want to acknowledge the comment that Lady Dana put in the chat, which is, yes, if women just go out and take it, it's not perceived in the same way as it is for men. And we can see that in terms of how women politicians are perceived, for example, differently compared to male politicians. And so that's one thing that I would encourage us all to be conscious about. The second thing is, in our own businesses, we can make changes. And I'll just give one example. When I hired an employee last year, it was actually the first employee that I hired, we know from an equity perspective that putting the salary on the job description makes a big difference, because men are going to be more likely to negotiate a higher salary compared to women. And so if we want equity, let's just be transparent about this role. This is a salary that it earns, and not keep that hidden. And then, you know, be surprised when later you have men and women doing the same job at very different salaries. And those things, to be honest with you, I think that they're going to be driven by women-owned businesses or by women-led businesses that are going to be the ones that are saying, hey, we really need to shake things up. Because if what we do is in our own businesses just replicate the same systems and practices that have created these inequities, it's like the old saying that, you know, is it Einstein? It's like, you know, you can't expect that doing the same thing is going to yield a different result. I'm paraphrasing that. So that would be my thing. By all means, have women go out there and change things. Let's take responsibility. I'm not saying that women-owned businesses need to receive investment if they're not qualified, but at the same time, let's fully also recognize that there are systems in place that are acting upon us, and that we need to be aware of those as well.
Superb, thank you. We have only a few more minutes left, and I do want to check in with the people who are on this call. Is there any questions that have come up so far that anyone would like to engage with? And Dana, thank you for your comment on the aggressive versus assertive. I think this is a big issue, and it comes up a lot. And I have an acronym for when women are called bitches, which is being in total charge of herself. So I love it. If somebody calls me a bitch, yes, I am in total charge of myself.
I love it.
But I want to further clarify on that point, because I believe that we have to make faster change. And the faster change comes with two different things. One is women taking more action. But the other piece of that that's absolutely critical is, maybe I disagree a little bit with Donaji, that there have to be some inequities to get back to some equity. That it is not equal, like Carolina talked about. So there has to be some correction. And I know I've seen in my career some old farts that were just horrible people, and it took forever to get them moved aside. And people who, you know, could not ever break through, you know, were not allowed to break through. So there has to be learning on the other side. Women, yes, clearly need to take more action. However, there needs to be a lot more action on the other side of there. On LinkedIn this morning, there was a lady who was talking about, as a woman, that she walked into situations where people would meet her for the first time after a few years and say, oh, have you had children yet? Or, you know, they would kind of go into things like that. And it's like, oh my God, you know, people need to learn, like, what's polite, what's respectful. And going back to what David had talked about, can't we have a workplace that's just balanced, where your talents just rise to the top, and we cut through a lot of this? And I think somebody talked about, and maybe you, Jacqueline, talked about, global people have more of an affinity to this because we're already doing it culturally. We've got to do it gender, but we only have that because we have experience with it. We have knowledge of it, and we have sensitivity to it. And so there's so much more sensitivity that needs to be brought into the workplace that's not there yet, to be able to make faster progress.
I totally agree with you. I think the sensitivity piece is missing. And David, you got something there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I was going to say, one thing that we haven't talked about is, or at least not much, is outside the business place, how our kids are raised at home. You know, if there's a perception that a woman speaking out is a bitch, you know, that is the type of attitude that we can change with our kids growing up. I mean, I don't have any daughters, but I have two sons. and they see their mom as a kick-ass person who can do what she wants to do, and you do not mess with her, you know. And I foster that, and not that I need to do anything to foster it because it's obvious, but that's the type of thing where we need to raise our kids, our boys and our girls, to see the equality and understand the equality, so that so many of the comments that we've made today don't need to be made. So they're not even observations. It's just how many men, women do you have on your team? I haven't thought about that, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. I have 3 daughters and a son, and all of them are kick-ass individuals at this point, and they take no prisoners when it comes to doing their own thing. And it's the way I raised them, you know. So I think there is a point to that. We are, again, as I said at the beginning, we are the role models for the future, and that is really one of our major roles. And for some people who are about to become grandparents, you know, there is, you know, there's that piece too. We are role models, so go from there. In our last couple of minutes here, I'd like you all to give me one closing thought that we can give to the audience and to those who'll be listening to this recording that kind of sums up what your whole philosophy about women and their position in society. And that might be a very big question right there, but just give me, based on our conversation today, give me something quick that we can leave with. Joelle.
All things are possible.
Beautiful. Donaji.
Women cannot do it by ourselves. We need to work as a team with men. We need to include them, and for women, just dare to dream big and make it happen. Thank you.
Super. David.
Change may be slower than we'd like, but it is happening. Just think of where we were in society 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
So true. Thank you. And Carolina.
Just, you know, that women don't underestimate yourselves. Let's not underestimate ourselves. And, you know, we can all do collectively, men and women and everyone, we can do more collectively together than on our own.
Beautiful. Alina.
I guess changes have to happen within, but also around us, and don't be discouraged by the slow progress. It's still progress, even if it's slow.
Excellent. Lainey, I'm going to ask you for a comment too, because you're a stalwart member of the Global Chamber. So give us the thought.
First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody. This has been a wonderful, wonderful session. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd piggyback on David and Alina's comments. Slow but steady may not be very exciting, but it will get us there. And let's keep at it.
Thank you. Dana.
I posted a quote today, which is one of my favorite ones on LinkedIn. I posted by Marianne Williamson, and I'll just read a few lines from it. Sorry. Just reminding us that we are more powerful than we imagine. And it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are more powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frighten us.
I always love that quote, and I have to toot my own horn. She endorsed my first book, The Fearless Factor. It was a brilliant light at the end of the tunnel. I love it. Valerie, would you like to give us a thought?
Sure. Accountability, control what you can control. And, you know, as individuals, male or female, you control yourself. You feed yourself as much knowledge as possible. You know, learn everything as you can and be an expert in what you love. And, you know, that's my 2 cents on that.
Super. Doug, your closing thought, please.
I think we need more men who are impatient with change. I am impatient, and I don't like the things just progressing. We need to make more aggressive change because it's our grandchildren. You know, it's our children that will benefit, and we need to have more people who feel really passionate about moving the dead wood out of the way and making progress.
Amen to that. And my closing thought is be fearless, see where it gets you. That is totally my tagline. Be fearless, see where it gets.
Indeed, you're right.
So I want to say thank you to every one of you for being here today for this really amazing conversation. It has been deep, it has been rich, and hopefully it will move the needle for those who are listening to it after the fact. So again, thank you all for coming today. It's been my pleasure.
Yay, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Powerful, powerful.
Powerful.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Okay, bye.